So this is our last group of snippets, which looks at the Trump years and constitutional controversy, usually active aspect of the president himself involved in these issues. So the first snippet looks at kind of a foundational thing and how we move towards the Russian investigation. And to me, the starting point is this famous photograph of then Secretary of State Clinton on her BlackBerry, presumably sending an email to a government official or to a foreign leader or to a political ally or someone. The problem, of course, with this photo is that Clinton's emails were routed through a private server, which was set up in her house rather than through the State Department server. And there never was a convincing explanation as to why she did this. The likeliest explanation was that both Clintons, I think, were distrustful of the media, believed that people were, their opponents were out to get them, and so set up a system that would avoid, would route her all of her emails through this private server, this Clinton email server, so that they then wouldn't be susceptible to Freedom of Information Act requests by members of the public or by conservative groups. The irony, of course, is that once this revealed, this becomes incredibly damning for her campaign, and there are a couple of problems that are created. The first is that she's required to turn over the emails to the federal government to see whether she had discussed any sort of classified information. Her lawyer says that something like 30,000 of the emails were private. Those are permanently deleted, but we sort of have to trust the lawyer's version. The second is this, whether she dealt with classified information over private email is potentially a criminal offense. There has to be an investigation by the Justice Department under President Obama, who the Attorney General was Loretta Lynch. During this investigation, former President Bill Clinton, flying through, of all places, Phoenix, Arizona, hears that Loretta Lynch is there, goes and visits her on her plane in a private section of the airport. This creates at least the appearance that he was lobbying the Attorney General to go soft on his wife. He says he never talked about anything with the AG. The AG says that she never talked about anything about the case with Clinton. But the result of this is that Lynch has to turn the case over, and she decides that she'll give it to the FBI director, Jim Comey, even though she never formally recuses. She does not appoint a special prosecutor. Comey completes his investigation. He concludes that Clinton has not broken the law. And part of or if she has broken the law, she hasn't done so in such a way that would yield, that would be fair to charge her criminally for this. And part of the reason for this was that there had been a previous release of improper handling of classified emails by the CIA director, David Petraeus, who shared private emails with his mistress, who was writing a book, and Petraeus ultimately didn't go to jail for this. He accepted a plea bargain, and so Comey concluded, I think correctly, that look, if Petraeus didn't go to jail for this, you can't argue that Clinton's offense has reached the level of necessary to prosecute. That should have been the end of the case. When the FBI investigates you and they conclude that you've done nothing wrong, they don't do a press conference. Comey does, however, do a press conference. He says that Clinton didn't do anything to warrant charges, but then excoriates her personally in the middle of a presidential campaign. And then he goes before Congress and more or less does the same. This is a brief clip of an exchange that he has with a South Carolina Republican congressman named Trey Gowdy.
Morning, Director Comey. Secretary Clinton said she never sent or received any classified information over her private email. Was that true?
Our investigation found that there was classified information sent.
So it was not true?
Right. That's what I said.
Okay. Well, I'm looking for a little shorter answer so you and I are not here quite as long. Secretary Clinton said there was nothing marked classified on her emails either sent or received. Was that true?
That's not true. There were a small number of portion markings on, I think, 3 of the documents.
Secretary
Three-
Clinton said, I
sorry,
did
3 of
not
the
email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. Was that true?
Now, there was classified material emailed.
Secretary Clinton said she used just one device. Was that true?
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
Secretary Clinton said all work-related emails were returned to the State Department. Was that true?
No, we found work-related emails, thousands, that were not returned.
Secretary Clinton said neither she nor anyone else deleted work-related emails from her personal account. Was that true?
That's a harder one to answer. We found traces of work-related emails on devices or in Slack space, whether they were deleted or whether when a server was changed out, something happened to them. There's no doubt that there were work-related emails that were removed electronically from the email system.
Secretary Clinton said her lawyers read every one of the emails and were overly inclusive. Did her lawyers read the email content individually?
No.
Comey is not terribly reluctant to give this testimony. So you have this odd situation where the FBI director is attacking the likely next president of the United States. Comey, this was an odd appointment by Barack Obama. Comey had worked in the Bush administration. He had developed a reputation for independence, but he's someone with a significantly inflated sense of self. And in this hearing, Comey promises that if any new information comes out about the emails, he would, sorry about this, he would divulge it to Congress. Just before the election, it turns out that the husband of Clinton's closest aide, a man named Anthony Weiner, who we all remember, former New York congressman, ran for mayor of New York, was under investigation for online sexual escapades with underage girls. It's investigated by the FBI. They seize his computer. They find that his wife, Umar Abedin, has downloaded these Clinton emails and that they're on Weiner's computer. It's not clear if they're the same emails that Clinton had turned over to the FBI. It turns out that they were, but this isn't known at the time. Comey delivers a letter saying that there's more Clinton emails. Clinton winds up losing the election. You could make a pretty compelling argument that absent this revelation, Clinton would have defeated Trump. She drops by around 3 points in the polls after Comey's letter. So Trump is in. Comey is despised by Democrats, sort of not really liked all that much by Republicans either. But the custom is that the director of the FBI serves unless fired for good cause. So Comey is likely to continue. Comey seems to have viewed his next set of actions as trying to rehabilitate his reputation with Democrats. And very shortly after the election, Comey begins an investigation of this man, Michael Flynn, who was Trump's nominee to be national security advisor. Flynn had worked in a national security position under President Obama, was fired, had kind of gone off the deep end ideologically in the aftermath of this. Appears at the he's a major Trump endorser, appears at the 2016 Republican National Convention, leading delegates in a chant to lock Hillary Clinton up. It turns out he's also receiving funds from the Turkish government to lobby on behalf of Turkey, even though he had not registered as a foreign agent. This is a guy who should have been nowhere near the national security advisor position, but Trump likes him. He goes ahead with the appointment, and there's the FBI starts looking into whether or not he violated this Watergate era law called the foreign lobbyist. It's a law that requires if you're working as a foreign lobbyist, you have to register with the government. Traditionally, when lobbyists didn't register, they would face a fine, but the Flynn investigation is a criminal one. In the course of that investigation, this is the interregnum between Obama and Trump. Flynn has a conversation with the Russian ambassador to the U.S. This kind of conversation is entirely typical. Foreign policy officials from the incoming administration, often will speak to world leaders. And the nature of this conversation was also not problematic in and of itself. Flynn seems to have been pressing the Russians not to escalate a diplomatic tete-a-tete with the U.S. But there's a broader context to this. The Russians were widely and correctly seen as having intervened in the 2016 election, largely through this organization called WikiLeaks, which had hacked into various Democrats' emails, including the chair of Clinton's campaign, a guy named John Podesta, and also the Democratic National Committee. And during the campaign, Trump, you can see some of the quotes here, talked about WikiLeaks as if it was like, the local news organization rather than as a de facto agency of Russian intelligence. The critics of Trump argue that he was in cahoots with WikiLeaks, that there was an active assistance going on. Trump always denies this, but in any case, there's this sense. Here now the FBI has a tape because they have audio recordings of the conversations with the Russian ambassador, of the incoming national security advisor talking with the national security advisor. There's some talk that maybe he had violated the Logan Act, the 1790s law that prevents private American citizens from negotiating with a foreign government, an act that hadn't been enforced in 200 years. The FBI interviews Flynn. He lies about his meeting with the Russian ambassador, and ultimately he will be indicted both for violating the Foreign Lobbyists Act, Registration Act, and for lying to the FBI. Comey also at this point shares with Trump a dossier. It comes to be known as the Steele dossier, which more than a year later it will be revealed was financed by the Clinton presidential campaign of 2016. Its provenance at this point is unclear. It's put together by a former British intelligence officer, which contains a lot of basically gossip about Trump. Whether or not the Steele dossier is true or mostly true or partially true or not particularly true is not clear at the time. Eventually, it became clear that the FBI really didn't see this information as likely true. But in the Comey meeting with Trump, Comey reveals the existence of the dossier. Trump wildly inappropriately presses him to drop the investigation of Flynn. Comey starts writing up memos that he's going to leak as a way of triggering an investigation of Trump. This, as with his handling of Clinton, Comey's handling of the relationship with Trump is a counterintuitive one for the director of the FBI. Now, in theory, Trump, who seems to have viewed the Justice Department more as his personal lawyer rather than as lawyers of the U.S. government, believed that he'd be able to control any investigation of the Russia affair through his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, a former Alabama senator who had endorsed Trump, and Trump named him AG. The problem is that during the campaign, when he was working on behalf of the Trump campaign, Sessions had met with the Russian ambassador. So Sessions had a conflict of interest in investigating Russian influence in the campaign, and appropriately follows ethics guidelines and recuses himself. His decision to do so infuriates Trump, and Trump ultimately will fire him the next year. The result of this of Sessions' recusal, however, is the appointment of a special counsel named Robert Mueller, the former director of the FBI, and the Mueller inquiry will hover over much of the Trump presidency, and we'll be talking about that in a later snippet.